Good afternoon, and welcome if you're tuning in to Politico's Competitive Europe Week, either online or here in the room with us in Brussels. Very warm welcome. My name is Koen Verhelst. I'm a trade reporter with Politico, and today we'll be talking a bit more about the critical raw materials race. First of all, if you're talking about us on social media, on X or any other platform of your choice, Blue Sky, Mastodon, name them all, please use the hashtag Politico Competitive Week to let us hear your thoughts about the discussion today and about panels to come. So critical raw materials. It's before we actually dive into our own hunger at lunch, and we have a quiche. We're going to talk about a hunger for something very different: lithium, copper, cobalt, those kind of materials. They're essential for the digital and energy transitions that the EU and the rest of the world is facing. There have been quite some initiatives on the European level on this front. Last year, at a record speed, we had the Critical Raw Materials Act, which went through the Parliament and trilogues in, I believe it was 8 months or so. It was very, very quick. And this law, I'll just lay it out to you for a little bit, because we're getting a little bit into the technical weeds here. There's a few really important numbers to remember. 10% of the EU's consumption of critical raw materials should be extracted within the EU under this law. 40% should be processed within the bloc, so it should be brought from elsewhere but processed over here. And 25% should be recycled within the bloc. That was actually higher than the initial proposal. And probably the most important benchmark of all, no more than 65% of a single raw material, take lithium for example, can come from one single third country. And there's a few examples of this, like platinum, for instance. 90% of that comes from South Africa. Related metals, it's a similar number, or even higher. The rare earth elements critical for batteries come 100% from China. And China is, of course, a major factor here. They've instated their own measures. They've put export limitations on germanium, gallium, and graphite. The European companies have to navigate these at the moment. And then the Critical Raw Materials Act, to come back to that, it sets out also permitting processes to speed them up within the European Union and outside of it, hopefully, under what it calls strategic projects. And the Commission has just taken applications for that. I think it was in May, they released that 170 applications were received, so we will get to that in a second. And then another strategic thing is strategic partnerships, which is more like a bilateral situation. So the EU has these with Serbia, Australia, Greenland, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the usual suspects in a way when it comes to raw materials. So to discuss that with me here are three excellent panelists. Starting off on the far side, Camilla Swoepek from Eurometaux, a lobby group for the European metals sector. She has, I believe, 18 years of experience in this field in Brussels, so that's what she brings to us here today. In the middle, Joan Canton, the head of unit, and I will say it correctly, for energy-intensive industries and raw materials at DG Grow. 2 days in the job, mind you. Has just but that means no stranger to this topic, because until very recently he was in the cabinet of Thierry Breton to focus on critical raw materials and a bunch of other topics. So, last but not least, Patrick ten Brink, the Secretary General of the European Environmental Bureau, a collection of national NGOs on the environmental front, keeping an eye on how this all is implemented. I'm going to start in the middle with the Commission, Joan, if I may, to bring it back to these 170 special projects that, let's say, mining companies, processing companies, battery makers would apply to. 170 applications you've received over the application window. How does the Commission select these kind of things?
Thanks a lot, and good afternoon, everyone. And indeed, second day in the job and already speaking at the Politico event, so I'm very...
Not a bad start.
I'm happy, but also humbled, so please bear with me on these topics. Indeed, I mean, one of the key features of the Critical Raw Materials Act for the reasons mentioned by Koen in introduction, in terms of the dependencies, in terms of the absolute need of the raw materials for our twin transition, for the green transition, for the digital transition, for defense. One of the key features of the Critical Raw Materials Act was this possibility to select and label a number of projects as strategic projects. Once a project is considered strategic, it has a number of benefits through the Critical Raw Materials Act, in particular in terms of permitting, in terms of the ability to discuss funding options, to leverage private funding, and a number of other factors that make them, valuable for the EU as a whole. And so we launched the first call for applications. It finished at the end of August, and indeed we received 170 applications, which for us is a good success. It's a good success because it shows that there are out there, and I'll come back on this in a minute, many projects that are relevant along the supply chain in Europe and in third countries, because this is not limited to European projects only, it can also be in third countries. So out of the 170, we have about a third of projects that are in third countries, and out of the 170, we have projects along the supply chain. And that's very important for us because indeed, it's about extracting minerals. It's also about processing and refining them. It's about recycling them. And it's even about substituting from them. So removing and investing in other options than the raw materials we use today for the technologies we use today. And the fact that we have a broad spectrum of projects is for us very, very important because it shows that we can tackle this issue at every stage of the value chain. And I would say, speaking under the control of my colleagues, for almost every strategic raw material we identified in the Critical Raw Materials Act as well. That's also very important. So we are assessing them, analyzing them. We will select a number of projects that we will label as the first strategic projects in the coming months. Coming months. This is not a one-off exercise. This is an exercise that will continue occur over the lifetime of the Critical Raw Materials Act on a regular basis. And this will evolve, of course, depending on projects, depending on innovation, depending on needs, depending on demand, and depending on supply.
And how many of these projects will make the cut?
So there is no clear number. I think we will assess the projects on the basis of their merits, on the basis of, we have criteria to respect under the Critical Raw Materials Act. So when it comes to their contribution to European industrial objectives, so they need to be able to deliver and help European industry upstream, downstream. In terms of the high environmental and social standards, of course, we want to make sure that we respect this. In terms of the degree of maturity as well, because the intention is for these projects to materialize quickly. Because of the benefits they can get through the Critical Raw Materials Act, through faster permitting, shorter deadlines, we need to be able for these projects to emerge relatively quickly. So that's a number of factors that we will look into. The exact number of final strategy, I can't. I don't know. We don't have a fixed number in mind. We know we need to be selective, we need to be focused, but also we also need to assess in detail the quality of the project's applications received.
So it might actually overlap a bit with the commissioner hearings, if I'm not mishearing your timeline here.
I believe that we will have I hope we will have the hearings before the final assessment of the strategic projects.
Yeah. That brings me to Eurometaux, Camilla. There's going to be a lot of commissioners involved in this file because it's perhaps, as it already has been in the previous mandate, been a bit spread out across the Commission. For you as a representative of the European metals industry, how does it affect your work, and how does it affect the company's perspective that there are so many commissioners involved?
There are indeed. We will have to navigate, but this is always the duty of the industry. Whenever we have the new regulation or directive coming, we need to navigate and learn how to live with it. Indeed, we are looking in very interestingly with the portfolio by the Executive VP Ribera, with the portfolio of the VP for Environment and Industrial Strategy. So this would be the immediate ones where we have to keep a close eye on, but then we will also look into the Commissioner for the Climate, Net Zero Clean Growth, for the Commissioner for the Financial Services, because this is also relevant for the industry, for the Commissioner for Trade, and I think last but not least on my list, it was the Commissioner for Economy and Productivity. And wow, this is already quite a bunch we will have to be attentive to. And we also are very attentive to the fact that those key people in the College of Commissioners, they need to communicate with each other. Because as the example from the Critical Raw Materials Act, it was a good work where a lot of services in the Commission were really united for one front, because it was a good initiative that DG GROW has brought into the attention of the colleagues across the Commission. So now we would expect that the same good level of the dialogue and exchange will be across the future college.
So can the Critical Raw Materials Act somewhat facilitate this, you think? Or is that mostly, to facilitate the strategic projects?
Let's take it as a good example,
Yeah.
how the services internally can talk to each other. And let's take it as a flagship example.
Just in general, of course, the Critical Raw Materials Act does a lot of let's say, permission streamlining, or permitting streamlining, I should say. What is the biggest promise of this piece of legislation from companies' perspectives?
From the company's perspective, we are very much looking forward to this very short time for granting the strategic projects for the mining and for the recycling that would get respectively 12 months, if I'm not mistaken, and 24. This is great. This is going to look great. It is looking great on the paper. We will now attentively look if there is any first case that actually can materialize according to those deadlines. And I think if that will happen, then we can really celebrate that something we had in mind as a simplification and facilitation of the industry well-being that actually can take place.
Right, because it's been a long, long time since the last new mine opened in Europe, so that's a critical test here. Moving to the environmental side, Patrick, in the case of the Critical Raw Materials Act, is only like one part of the puzzle, one piece of the puzzle. It of course implements also environmental standards to some degree, but there's a lot of talk of like the next step, the Clean Industrial Act. How do you view this from an environmental NGO point of view?
Okay. No, thanks for the question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and the Clean Industrial Deal for us at one level is a major opportunity if it's got right, but it could also be a major missed opportunity if got wrong, and there's some risks, so it's probably worthwhile articulating them. I mean, clearly the first word is clean, so what is clean? Is it purely decarbonizing? Or does it also integrate circular economy issues, which is an opportunity? Does it also include issues of pollution? For me, clean means zero pollution, which is a commitment. So if we can have an integrated approach into this, so clean actually means totally clean, not just decarbonized, I think it's a major opportunity. There could also be a certain missed opportunities depending on where you decide to put the money. It's because the money doesn't have the same impact depending on where it flows. So choosing where it goes is really fundamentally important. So if you focus, I mean, electrification is of course one key element in this whole deal, which is necessary for the transformation. You've also got other areas where you have hard to abate sectors where you'll need some green hydrogen. But then if you want to really go into where you spend your money, you want to spend it on areas where it's cost effective, where it actually is available now, and where it leads to significant benefits. If you look through the economics lens and the availability lens, then I think you'll have a different answer than if you just listen to what a lot of people say we need. I can expand that a little bit more, but I think everyone understands what I say. There's some risks as well. So one of the risks is the simplification and the permitting side. I have got no problem with the idea of accelerating permitting because we need to get on with it. That's true. But if you actually look at the solution, it's often the wrong solution for a real problem. And if you go back to 2008, to the financial crisis, and with austerity, lots and lots of regions cut back on the ability to do permitting, cut back on the ability to do assessment, cut back on the ability to have public engagement and participation. If we were to invest collectively the time to make sure the local and regional national authorities have the money to do this properly, then it actually could accelerate the permitting, which is what the industry needs. But it also means you keep citizens on board and support democracy, which I think all of us desire. So I think that's really quite important. So look through the lens of what will be the impacts. And there's, of course, a range of essential elements throughout. And one of them is it can't only be an industry deal, it has to also be a social deal, because we need to have the community on board for the way forward to make sure it's a collective cooperation rather than opposition. And for that, we need to then make sure the people and citizens are engaged, to be able to listen to their concerns and then address them so that any activity, whether it's existing mining or new mining, follows certain procedures which give people trust that this transition can be a common one.
Well, that's a very interesting point you make there, because I think even throughout the implementation of the trilogues, the negotiations on the Critical Raw Materials Act, there was a question, okay, well, this law is great, it's all about permitting, but where's the money? And the money question was always more focused on how are we going to invest? Where's the money going to be coming from to, let's say, build a factory to process lithium here? But you're saying it's also a labor market question. It's a governance question. Like, our bureaucracies they're not doing it slow because there are so many rules, but they're doing it. There's delays because there's too few people to do it. That brings me back to the Commission, I guess, Joan. What are you hearing from member states on this topic? Is there a push? Is there an awareness of this issue?
No, many thanks for the question, and indeed that's a very valid point. I mean, what we have in legislation, in fine, needs to be delivered on the ground. And we can have very stringent permitting deadlines. This needs to be followed up afterwards on the ground by proper work, respecting environmental standards, so no shortcuts in terms of what we do, but indeed acceleration of what has happened. And in the initial discussions we have with member states indeed point to this challenge, in particular for some smaller member states that say, look, we have a bottleneck in terms of our ability at national, regional, or local level in dealing with these applications, in dealing with this process, in the complexity of this. And that's why we are offering through EU budget support or technical assistance through the technical support instrument upon request from member states, exactly to help them tackle one of these challenges, which is indeed the ability of public authorities to deal with the complexity of some of these projects. So we're aware of the challenge, and we're trying to tackle it through appropriate technical assistance support.
This would be also about retraining civil servants or hiring new people, or seconding people from the Commission to member states, perhaps, or?
On the last point, I don't know, but indeed the idea is indeed to retrain. One thing, if I may, to broaden a little bit the issue, we also have a challenge, and maybe colleagues can get a better place than I am to identify this, but it's the question of making sure we have the right skilled workforce to work in these new sectors, in the new mining activities, in the processing plants, in the recycling plants, and so on and so forth. So one of the dimensions we try to promote as well is an academy, like we've done for batteries, like we've done for other sectors, a raw materials academy, to be able to provide training support, not to do the training ourselves directly, but at least to have available to member states, to companies, the necessary training to be able to have the right skilled workforce to work in this new and very exciting and emerging, or not so new, but very exciting and very important sectors and strategic sectors for Europe.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. So this might be integrated in existing universities, for instance, or
or it can be made available to any interested party in terms of content.
Mm-hmm. Right. That.
If I may,
yeah, please,
just
Camilla, go ahead.
The discussion here. Indeed, this request for increasing skilled labor and availability of those people on the market, that has been clearly notified by the non-ferrous metal industry. We have made a calculation that overall, for the challenges that will be coming with the extraction, processing, and recycling of the raw materials, we will need roughly 10,000 new people on the market to be ready and to deliver in the jobs like geology, like metallurgy, like engineering. This is really going to be a big number that we will need. And speaking about how to train or how to trigger the interest for people to come in future and work with the industry, we in Eurometaux are actually now performing once a year only Metals Academy. This is an initiative that has been growing in the organization, and it has materialized. It already had 3 editions, and already the edition number 4 is in preparation. Mm-hmm. And guess what? We have waiting list already full for next year.
That's too bad. I was going to open it up to the room to see who would be interested here, but
exactly.
And this number you mentioned, 10,000
yes.
10,000 jobs, right?
Yes.
This is both in the private sector and on the public side for processing permits, or?
No, that's what we looked for, the industry needs
on your
clearly,
end.
yes.
Yeah, I see.
And I can also imagine on the administrative side, the number, I'm not saying it has to be comparable because that would be a little maybe worrying, but increasingly, yes. We see that sometimes when we apply for the permit, for example, for shipping of waste permit, that takes roughly between 6 months and even 1 year before a company gets a green light from the authorities.
And there's another funding question here, because it's not only about the labor issue, obviously, also about the possibility to actually build factories, because Europe needs to reindustrialize to some degree to make sure we don't get our energy from somewhere else. So this is also a question for you, Camilla. Like, there is this funding gap, yes. Do you see any openings with for the next mandate of for the von der Leyen Commission to bring this forward? Where could the money come from?
We see for the moment suggestions that the money can come from various sources. And that's, it's a little bit unfortunate, because it would be beautiful lifetime if we would have the act coming with one central point, one pot of money where we can take them from. We know this is not the case. So now we are looking really into the various sources where this money can come from. We have been jointly with other organizations representing batteries, so recharge, and also transport and environment, representing the NGOs, calling, for example, to set up a fund for batteries, to have very specific product in the scope, and, for example, to move along this line, as this is speaking from the market perspective, one of the products that will be highly demanded if we would look into the deployment of the electric mobility, which is strongly connected again to the fact that we will need more raw materials that can build up the batteries and then the materials that will come into the new cars. Yeah. Having that sources scattered in many places has one major obstacle. You need to have a lot of patience to really dwell and check everywhere what are the rules. That takes time, but as I say, if somebody is really interested and driven by the project, then you will really look up everywhere, even in the tiny hole where the mouse can hide, to find the rule that will allow you to apply for financing.
Right. Patrick, that brings me to you, because we also need money to protect the environment, after all.
Yeah, there's only so much money to go around. So I think the question is, where would the monies naturally flow? So if you look at on the business side, of course, it needs to be a business case. If you look at the nature of the investments, I think if you look particularly only where there's a business case, we'll be able to do maybe 30% to 40% of Draghi's 800 million. I think that's quite important. So we can't rely purely on that. There's a lot of potential around green public procurement. Public procurement is 14% of GDP, whereas the European budget is 1%. If you green that, then it already makes a big difference and creates it. So you can pull a lot of that towards renewable energies, which, if it rolls out, should lead to lower prices, which should lead to a competitive support for industry. You've also got a range of other issues. It's not just European, but it's also national. The question is then which is public and which is private, and that then depends on the question as to what you're focusing on. And last speaker mentioned that we need a lot more investment in raw materials for the move from fossil fuel vehicles to electrification. I'd like to say, in all of these cases, let's take a step back and ask ourselves the question, do we need everything? If we do, we do. If we don't, we don't. We just need to ask that question. Because do we really need a one-to-one replacement of fossil fuel vehicles with electric vehicles? And if you look at Brussels, I'm sure a lot of us here would say no. If you look at any cities, the answer is no. So here we actually need, and if we talk about strategic priorities, then what about trains? What about public transport? What about, and so on? Europe used to be the leader on transport, whereas now all the news is coming from China on that. So I think there we need to just look carefully. And if the answer is yes, it's yes. But I think there's some interesting opportunities around car sharing. There's other interesting opportunities around doing other things. And then it gets to also the question then of who has the money. So the money there should then be an issue of where it's public money and public investment. We need a sort of an public innovation fund. We need also an infrastructure investment for effectively mobility, which actually leads to a reduction in the need for lithium, which would then lead to a reduction in need for mines. I think there'll be plenty of demand for lithium. Just to be clear, there'll be plenty of mining activity for everyone. So I'm not asking to close down mines. I'm just saying let's only focus where it's actually needed and have that through the lens. Okay. And the last thing to mention just quickly, because it is about the issue of the private return, because if you look at some issues now, we've seen all the flooding in the States, in Europe. If you're looking at infrastructure needs for the coastal protection, which then protects everyone in all industries, we often think of levies. But what about who's going to pay for that? Is it going to be private sector money, or is it going to be public money? And then again, so there we need to think through where are the market failures and where are the governance failures, and hence where do we need what money to be able to make a difference? And I think that will be quite an important issue. And even there, we need to look at cost effectiveness. I'm both a scientist and an economist, but we need to look at cost effectiveness. And if you've looked at experiences around Europe of how these type of climate adaptation measures are done, it's often a mixture of both grey infrastructure and green infrastructure. And there we shouldn't forget the nature-based solutions, and often there's some triple wins in that. So again, just look through the lens of cost effectiveness, be honest about where there's market failures, and hence the money won't flow. Business money will flow where it makes profits. That's the DNA. Yeah. But it's not going to flow everywhere, so we need to identify that quickly and then make sure we have the mechanism. So people say now, we won't have enough public money, we spent it all. But I think we've got no choice. I mean, really, if you start thinking now of the impacts of cost of policy in action in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years, and 20 years, if you think that it's going to have an impact on future revenue and GDP growth reductions all mean tax reductions. It also means income reductions for other things. It means demand reductions for a lot of things. So we need to make sure we think the long term as well as the short term. And then that puzzle starts to put itself together. But I think I'm probably going to speak more than my second's worth, so I can share other things separately.
This is the agony that Mario Draghi talked about in his report, no? The slow demise.
Well, Mario Draghi said a couple of really clever things. He recognized the need for investment and decarbonization, and he recognized that we need a lot of money for it. But I think he made some deep errors in his analysis, and that he concluded that regulation was a brake on this, but actually it's quite the contrary. I mean, we've worked a lot together with the OECD. I've spent years working on innovation policy. If you look at regulations policy, it actually is a driver and a catalyst of innovation. Right. It actually supports competitiveness. If you invest in local infrastructure, it's a pull for attracting investment into the area because of new infrastructure. So I think if you read the Draghi report, read bits of it, but take the rest and say he hasn't had a sufficient consultation and he missed a trick. Even smart people can miss a trick. Okay, so I would just say read that bit, not the other bit.
Well, you got a bit of an applause over there. That's an interesting response. I want to bring it back to the Commission quickly, because how would you read the Draghi report in this context? I mean, there is of course, the major responsibility will be on the member states probably, but yeah, what about the agenda setting here on your side?
Well, I think that the Draghi report was very clear indeed that we have an investment challenge ahead of us. There is an investment world that we are facing that we need to deal with if we want to succeed in our green and digital transition, and if we want to ensure prosperity and competitiveness for Europe. So I think this assessment is 100% correct, including on the need to continue to invest in decarbonization. Beyond that, I mean, Mr. Draghi has a number of recommendations, including on how much money is needed, where it should come from. I think from the Commission perspective at this stage, I mean, the President in her guidelines has already highlighted a little bit some of the elements that she wants to put forward in the context of the next MFF and the discussions. The EU budget on its own will never be sufficient. That's clear, that's obvious. We need to use the EU budget as best as possible to leverage private funding, to de-risk projects. And if I go back to critical raw materials, I think this is one of the key issues that the sector is facing. And again, speaking under the control of the experts, but the riskiness of some of the projects, or the appetite of private and public investors to join in these projects, is really a key challenge. And here, it's not guaranteed that we need huge amount of public money, but we need to demonstrate, and that's what we do with the strategic projects and other tools, we need to demonstrate that there is a business case, and that the business case can make sense, and we can give a perspective to the sector. Giving a perspective meaning you will not wait 20 years to get your permit. You can have a permit before. Giving a perspective means we will work to ensure that there is growing demand for recycled raw materials, because we will work at product level to ensure the recyclability of the products. We will work to ensure that the partnerships we have with third countries are more than just memorandum of understanding, but are actually investment partnerships with industry present, with business missions, with discussions, concrete discussions on projects. So that's all of this that I think that can help trigger additional investment, because there is no choice but to have additional investment, including with the limited budget available that we have. And just to mention sorry to zoom back on the raw materials, but in terms of, yes, we absolutely need to invest in substitution. And that's what we do through the EU budget, through Horizon Europe. We invest in projects in substitution. Yes, we need to be prepared and invest in recyclability, and the guidelines identify, circular economy, secondary market, or single market for secondary raw materials as essential priorities. But in the next 5 to 10 years, there is growing demand that we will need to be able to satisfy through partnerships, through additional mining projects, through additional extraction, through additional refining and processing. I don't know how much, but there will be an increase. At least all the projections that I've seen show an increase. And I agree that if this increase is as little as possible, that's fine as well. But there is this increase, so there is this appetite, and there is the need to reflect this in our policy priorities.
And there is a geopolitical pressure on this as well, because China is dominant on a lot of the critical raw materials on the list.
Yep.
So that's another factor. Are you confident that the 65% benchmark to reduce, let's say, for instance, rare earth elements from China? Do you think the Critical Raw Materials Act is set to do that?
First of all, it was, I think, a very important step to have this in the Act. It was not an easy ride, but it's in the Act. It's a commitment that we all share. European level, national level, private sector. So we all need to work on this together. And yes, I'm confident that we have the tools. We haven't discussed everything that is in the Raw Materials Act, but there are ways of discussing with industry, possible risk mitigation approaches, diversification objectives that we can deliver eventually on this 65% objective, as well as on the other objectives that you recall at the beginning of the discussion. But it's a common endeavor. The Commission alone is not going to do that. The EU alone is not going to do that. We need to work on this together.
Camilla, to end with you, do you feel like the zeitgeist is maybe finally on the side of the metal sector with all this talk about critical raw materials?
There is definitely a spotlight, and we could not have asked for a better, listing of the materials that will help us to build hopefully better future. But though there is one, I think, aspect that I would like to add to the fact that there is still the demand for more capacity in terms of extraction, processing, and recycling. There is one other factor that did not sound yet in the discussion. Industry is constantly fighting with very high electricity prices.
Right.
We are electro-intensive. And unfortunately, for the moment, we are seeing a lot of either sometimes facilities shut down, or they go to a temporary technical break in order to survive. Right. So in that context as well, we have to come in with a consideration how to tackle that big elephant in the room that is with us for a number of years right now.
For sure. Thanks very much to my esteemed panelists. That wraps up our critical raw materials session. We will have lunch now in the room right behind us, and we will be resuming in about half an hour at 2:30. Thanks all very much, and see you in a bit.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
And looking ahead to what is next. genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets.